the Reverend, joining us now for more on this. Reverend, good evening to you and thank you very much for your time. Can I start the conversation with your thoughts on the imminent departure of the envoys that will be sent by President Ramaphosa to a number of countries, but in the main, the United States, to try and clarify South Africa's laws, particularly laws around redress? Do you think that that is a necessary evil?
Well, it is necessary now because, it's a different world we are living in. You know, the normal world of international relations, a regulated form of relationships. You can't have arbitrary action. You can't have a country making a decision based on wrong information. A superpower, for that matter, with all the intelligence in the world, would have an order by the president that's based on falsehoods. And I think that's what makes this world dangerous to live in.
Yeah.
And that's why I am saying we have gone back to the imperial period, gone back to the times of slavery where you could take slaves, put them in ships and take them to the Americas without any rights. It's a period of colonialism where Europe could do anything they like in the world. They had their own democracies and constitution, but because they were racist in their thinking, they didn't think that the colonized have got the right themselves. So that's why I'm saying the Trump event, the happening, tells me that we're going back to the primitive years where power determines what happens rather than reality. Disregards of agreements, like you have ceasefire and it states the processes. And you come in, you don't go to the negotiation table to change it, and you say, by this Saturday, this all the people who were
abducted,
taken by Hamas should be released. But it doesn't follow the process. And that's what is concerning us greatly. And we need to worry about this, because if we go back to those periods, then we have to go back to engage in a struggle against racism, colonialism, and arbitrary action, because democracy does not allow arbitrary action. You have to work within the law.
Reverend Frank Chikane, I'm aware that you are probably going to be restrained in your comments here. But what do you make of the character of the man who occupies the Oval Office in the United States right now? Or is that not even something that concerns you? Because we are where we are, because not every American holds the same view that President Trump holds. But unfortunately, the world has to react in a particular fashion because Donald Trump occupies the White House. What do you make of his decision-making style?
Well, I don't have to go into the character. I work on the basis of the decisions that he makes, which have serious implications for the world and the people of the world, especially if you are a superpower like the United States with nuclear weapons. They always say you can't have a regime that is not responsible to have nuclear weapons. Now, if the people with nuclear weapons ignore international law and act arbitrarily, then you've got a crisis. But you see, the people of the United States have got a huge responsibility for this. They gave the man the vote. They voted for him, and therefore he represents them. Unless if they take a stand and say, no, not in our name, and they must have enough number of millions to say so, because they voted for him democratically. And that's why I've said before, I read about the Hitler event to understand what happened in Germany. And Hitler was democratically elected and stood for the people of Germany. And the rest is history. And so you could have a democratic process that give you an outcome that might be very dangerous for the world. And I am concerned. You know, I don't mind them representing their interests. I don't mind them doing whatever in terms of what they believe is good for the United States.
Yeah.
But you can't come and say the people of Gaza must be removed to Jordan and Egypt, and that you're going to build a Riviera there so that people can enjoy themselves, but the aborigines and the owners of that land have been thrown out. Instead of saying these people are refugees, they have been thrown from the current Israel since 1948, and say they have the right to return to their homes. I met some of them. They still have keys for their homes. They know where the home is, but they've been removed there without any rights, no compensation for their properties and etc. And then you come and talk about appropriation without compensation in South Africa. What is the difference between the Afrikaners they are talking about here who do not agree with them except some small group, and the Palestinians in Israel? They have been removed. They have no right. One of them drove me across the wall in Bethlehem to Jerusalem, you know, and showed me the house in West Jerusalem, that this is our house, but I can't come back here because I'm Palestinian. That's racist. That's why I'm concerned that going back to the colonial, pre-colonial slavery period means we're going back to racism where people are dealt with in terms of their color, ethnicity. It can't be allowed. The world must say no to that approach.
Well, here's a question for you, Reverend, because you're now going exactly where I thought you were. You've spoken about the primitive era that the world seems to be pushed towards. You speak about Hitler, who is basically responsible for the Holocaust that we saw. Yeah. And you now talk about the racism against the people of Palestine. Do you believe that a racist occupies the White House right now?
Well, it's quite clear. I mean, I don't want to characterize an individual. My concern as a South African is that you've got South Africans who are children of the apartheid system here, who are driving this train together with the President of the United States, linking up back here with those who never accepted the change from apartheid to a democracy. And they then judge South Africa on that basis. You know, if they just judged us on the basis of the International Court of Justice, our action there would debate and would have a completely different debate. But to come and say Afrikaners in South Africa are treated badly. I mean, Afrikaners, I've met Afrikaners in South Africa. We met the business people, everybody, and they say that they are doing better in the new South Africa than they did before. And they are living in a better environment than it was during the apartheid days, because apartheid was costly. But there's this collusion between those who have racist perspectives to influence Washington. And the people of the United States should say no to it. We don't want to be part of the old regime of taking sides with racists. Remember, people forget that the United States and the major European countries supported apartheid here up to the last moment. They actually helped the apartheid South Africa to acquire nuclear weapons and chemical weapons that were used against me and others. And it is only late in the day that they change because of pressure from the people in the United States and Europe. And I'm expecting that the people in the United States and Europe will take the same position. So the same people who support Israel's genocide in Gaza are the same who supported the apartheid system here. And I think we need to understand this. And remember again that when we settled 1993, they came here, the United States, France, and the UK, to come and ask us that they dismantle the nuclear weapons and take them away before we took over. And because we're committed to the policy of a nuclear-free Africa, we said to them, you can take them. And they did. They took them to France. People have forgotten that. So the same people who support the racism and Zionism, Zionism, it's a straightforward racism. The same group of people are the same who supported apartheid here. And the people they collaborate with in South Africa are those who supported apartheid. And I think we need to wake up. The world must wake up and say, we can't allow the world to go back. The signs were there, but were ignored.
Yeah.
Look at my book, the book on things that could not be said. I write there about the US refusing to sign the Rome Statutes. The Rome Statutes are for everybody in the world. They said no. They wanted the weak countries to support them, to exempt them from the Rome Statutes. And we said no. There can't be a law that's for others and not for the United States. If it is an international law, international criminal court, then it must be for everybody. And they say no. And when you act against them because they've behaved badly, to use his language, then they apply sanctions against the International Criminal Court. I mean, what type of world is that? It's almost like saying we have a democracy in South Africa, but a certain group of people can be subjected to the same law. No, we can't have that type of world. We need a world where everybody is equal. Small countries and large countries, powerful, powerless, all of them must be subjected to the same law.
Reverend Frank Chikane, let me ask you to pause there for a moment. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask, what does this moment represent for South Africa in particular, given that we are in charge of the G20, its presidency at least. That conversation next. Watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, we are in conversation with ANC veteran, Reverend Frank Chikane. Reverend, thanks for staying on. Can I ask you what you think this Trump moment represents for South Africa? And I'm phrasing it that way deliberately because this is the year that South Africa leads the G20, the first country on the continent to basically take the presidency of the G20. What do you think this moment, this Trump moment, represents for South Africa?
Well, let me say that the good thing about what's happening is that of these coincidences, that South Africa is actually leading the G20 to the next meeting. And the G20, it's a group of countries which care as well about rule of law and relationships internationally, diplomacy. And I leave it to the diplomats to interact with the United States. What is good, though, is that South Africa is on the right side of history. South Africa stands for respect for diversity, equality, and sustainability. And the majority of the world agrees with that position and can agree with Washington in terms of the positions they are holding on this one. Even in terms of the issue of apartheid and that we defeated apartheid in South Africa and they want to bring it back, the world will be on the side of South Africa. Even the issue about the Palestinian issue, I think Europe was beginning to back off to realize that they are now part of the genocide in Gaza. By the way, anybody who aids, who assists somebody to commit genocide can also be charged in terms of the Genocide Convention for assisting somebody to commit genocide. It is prohibited. And Europe was beginning to back off, and the Trump event then comes. And the arbitrariness is making Europe even more uncomfortable. And I'm convinced that we will come stronger in this particular position because we stand on the right side of history, of justice, of respect for diversity, equality, and sustainability in terms of the planet on which we live.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that the people in the United States will get Washington to change course and join the international community in the way in which we need to fix the world.
Yesterday, I watched the conference, the Munich Security Conference, and the foreign ministers of the EU bloc were already talking not in a way that almost celebrates this, but they were more worried that we might have a G19 because there appears to be a boycott. Already, we are not going to have the Secretary of State from the United States attending the conference or the summit of the foreign ministers. Should South Africa worry? Should South Africa care that it might well hold or host a G19 as opposed to a G20?
Well, I will leave that to the diplomats themselves because they are handling this particular matter. But I am saying if the withdrawal of the United States to participate in the G20 has to do with their position against respect of diversity, that there should be equality amongst people irrespective of their color, creed, or race, and if they are against sustainability, that we should manage our governance in the world, both business and countries, in terms of making sure the world we live with is sustainable and what we do is sustainable. then it's their choice. But I'm saying it's not the choice of the world. So it would actually be isolating themselves from the world rather than becoming part of the world.
Final question. There's been lots spoken about the cut to funding, and some views on this channel, on this very show this evening, are that perhaps this is the moment where we look back at that dependency on foreign aid. Do you believe that this is the moment that South Africa should look at itself and say, perhaps this is the time to stand on our own 2 feet?
Well, I've been holding this view from day one. I don't like to be controlled in terms of my thinking based on money or any benefits or help that I get from anybody. Every country has got the right, sovereign right, to make decisions about what is best for them. I mean, after this order and talking about Afrikaners who are victimized here, I mean, it's taking us backwards before 1994. We have been working for social cohesion, live together, not think about I'm white or black, I am African and Afrikaner or English or whatever. We've been trying to build a society where poverty does not discriminate. You become poor because you are black. It must not do that. We must have an equal society where everybody has got the opportunities to be able to live in this world.
Well,
and so,
Reverend, let me interrupt you there. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt you there because you touch on a matter that yesterday we covered on this station, a group of people that call themselves Afrikaners who were saying, and there was about 2,000 of them at the US Embassy in Pretoria, who are saying, we are ready to leave this country. What would your message be then to those people?
Well, my message to them is that you can't reverse the clock. You can't take us to the period when the majority of the people in this country had no rights, where their land was taken without compensation. My message to them is that Frank Chikane, as I speak now, we were removed, the Chikanes, twice during my lifetime. Once in 1953, and then in 1962. And my father abandoned the house in Bushbuck Ridge and came to Soweto, stayed permanently in Soweto, and never went back again to try to have a home because they removed us without compensation twice in my life. So they must not try to forget what they did to us. And when you try to fix it, they say, no, you must keep the old order. No, we must fix it. We're not against Afrikaners. We're not against anybody. In fact, some of us paid a price for believing in non-racialism. We want people of South Africa to be equal. And so my message to them is that they are misguided. I learned something when I worked with President Mbeki about phantom pain. That, if you used to have an arm and you lose it, you feel the pain forever, but you are healed. And so people have not forgotten that they used to treat us like less than human beings, and they want to remain in that particular position. That's why I believe that the majority of the people in South Africa don't agree with them. I think it's a fringe group. In any democracy, there will always be people like that, but they don't represent the Afrikaners in this country at all. They don't represent whites in this country. They don't represent the country at all. But if the United States chooses to relate with those types of people, it means their link and connection is a racist perspective. And that can be allowed. I mean, the world, of course, can agree.
Reverend Frank Chikane, thank you very much for your time and your views. The ANC veteran talking to us, though, in this instance, in his capacity as chairperson of the steering committee for the Global Anti-Apartheid Conference against Israel's settler, colonial and apartheid system. All right.